Welcome everybody to another episode of Level 10, your Heroes of the Storm tutorials. Today we're going to have a look at a favorite hero of mine, a specialist from the Diablo Universe, at Azmodan, the Lord of the Dunks. Azmodan is not only a really fun character to play, he's also incredibly strong at pushing down lanes, and especially in the late game, this guy can really pack a punch. He can do a huge amount of damage with the Globe of Annihilation, one of his abilities, and we're going to talk about that a bit later because this is one of his trademark abilities that we are going to focus on a lot with our talent build here. But of course, that's not the only ability that he has. Another skill is summoning a Demon Warrior, which is a great talent where you just summon a minion that barrels down a lane and does a bit of additional damage, and is of course also really good at soaking up ammunitions from the opponent's towers and helps you so to push with your own minion lanes down that road. Another great talent that he has is his laser beam, which is called All Shall Burn, and that's not only incredibly strong against buildings and helps you to take down a fort, for example, but at the same time it's also one of the talents that you can use in a team fight to dish out additional damage and really help your team. It's a great talent to have, and we're gonna see later how that really works in action. His passive trait is the General of Hell, and that is an ability where we have several talents later on that can also make it even stronger than it already is. It's just another summoning spell that you have that you can use to summon an additional warrior at any minion lane that you have on the map. You don't even need to be close to it, and that of course helps you to split push to make sure that another lane is maybe de-pushed a bit while you're trying to push a different lane with the rest of your team. The key talent for our Azmodan build is on level 1, when you go and take Taste for Blood, which really emphasizes the Globe of Annihilation once again. What really happens here is that with the Globe of Annihilation, Azmodan just launches a huge ball that has an incredible range and can dish out area of effect damage. And if you are able to pick up that talent on level 1 and then you kill a minion with it, you gain additional 2 damage permanently, up to 500. So you can really stack up the damage, and that's really where Azmodan comes into play. You need somebody to help you out a bit at the beginning of the match. We're going to talk about that later, but the idea here is to just like farm your Q, to farm the Globe of Annihilation damage throughout the entire game until you hit 300, 400 or maybe even 500 stacks at the end of the game, and then we can do a ton of damage with him, especially in those team fights where you might be able to hit 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 people of the opponent's team and do just like a ton of damage in addition to the wave pushing that you already have right from the start. On level 4 we take the Bound Minion trait, which is for our passive ability just a bit of an emphasizer. It helps us to really just push down a lane even harder, and it's really great once again if you're on a bottom lane, for example, and you see that the push at the top lane is not being contested by an opponent's hero. Just use that ability, it's usually on the D hotkey, and use Bound Minion in addition with the summoning of the General of Hell and try to push that lane in even harder without even leaving your own lane. It's a really great talent to have, and if you go for the summoning abilities that you have and include all of them on one single lane, then you can do a lot of damage. And if your opponent just for 1 second, or maybe just a couple, doesn't really pay attention to the lane, you can break down towers, you can break down the wall, and maybe even get a kill on the fort. The talent that we are going to take on Azmodan on level 7 is Infernal Globe, and that once again makes your Globe of Annihilation stronger. So right now you have a decreased casting time, and you also deal a bit of damage over time. The flight time is also reduced, and that makes you really scary, especially then later on in the game where you have a lot of damage accumulated on that spell. You can just use that to just throw those out the entire time. You have a shorter travel time, you do so much damage there, especially of course to the waves that are always coming in. So these talents are really important. The first 4 talents that you have, or the first 3 talents in this case, on the hero really set the pace of the game, and it becomes especially strong once that you hit your heroic ability. Once again, we have of course 2 choices here, but what we are going to do is we choose Black Pool. Because Black Pool summons, of course, a Black Pool, but as long as you stand in there, your abilities just gain ability damage. And from that point on, your Globe of Annihilation is becoming an incredible weapon, especially if you've done well in the early game and you already farmed a lot of stacks, since you can now easily, with a Black Pool and a Globe of Annihilation, take down any wave. And that of course means that once again you increase the damage on your Globe of Annihilation. Do that throughout the game, jump between like 2 lanes, maybe even 3, and just farm those waves, and you will have a significant amount of damage in the later stages of the game. On level 13, the talent that we are going to get is the March of Sin. The one problem that you always have with your All Shall Burn is that you need to stand in one spot when you use it. So it makes it sometimes a little bit difficult to really not get stunned by an opponent. Murden moves in, tries to throw a Storm Bolt, you can't dodge it, you eat it, and of course it interrupts also your channeling ability here. So with All Shall Burn, if you get the March of Sin, we can suddenly move, and that is incredibly powerful. Not only because in the fights we can suddenly move with the target and do even more damage, but even if somebody tries to chase you down, you just use All Shall Burn on him and move away from him, and if he decides to follow you, then he's going to take a lot of damage and might even die. And most opponents will turn around and just say like, alright, I'm not going to touch this guy. I don't know if maybe somebody else from his team is going to help him out in just a second, and I can't afford to lose too many hit points here. So really great talent to take here on level 13. Jumping onto level 16, what we are usually going to get here is Blood for Blood. It's just an incredible talent that Blizzard has in the game. Imposing Presence is of course another ability that you could get here, but Blood for Blood keeps you alive a bit longer. You're pretty fat, as mentioned already before, so you make for a magnificent target, and a lot of, especially Novas, are going to try to snipe you down immediately. If you have Blood for Blood, you can use that to get a couple of hit points back. And it also combos quite well with your All Shall Burn if you think about it. Once you have March for Sin taken on level 13, you can just Blood for Blood somebody that's already kind of low, use your laser and just follow him through. They are slowed down, they can't escape, and they die. So it's a great combination that you have here and extremely powerful. On level 20, what I would usually recommend for you to get is the Bolt of the Storm. Blink is just absolutely amazing. You oftentimes have a bit of a problem to get away from your opponent. Bolt of the Storm kind of solves that problem, but of course if you're in a lot of team fights and you really see that your team needs some additional sustain, Storm Shield is another ability that you could take here. So it's in the end up to you. If you're really selfish and you just want to get away, Bolt of the Storm is a weapon of choice. If you want to really fight with the team and you think that they need additional sustain and you're usually in those team fights, then the talent that you should get is probably Storm Shield. So now that we talked about the abilities and also the talents a bit, let's just focus a bit on how we need to play the hero. At the beginning of the game, it really pays off if you can play with a friend that is playing a hero that has area of effect damage, like for example Tacita. Tacita is great when you play with Azmodan, because what you do at the beginning of the match is that Tacita goes in and starts to use his area of effect spells towards the range creeps. That will of course be his Psionic Storm in this case. Works also with Jaina and her Blizzard. It works well with, for example, Vala, can use a multi-shot. It doesn't really matter all too much as long as the hero has some kind of area of effect damage that you can use. You target the range creeps, and then both you and your ally, you try to right-click the range creeps as well, up to the point where they're really, really low, and that's when you launch your Globe of Annihilation. The one thing that you need to know as well is that if your globe doesn't really kill the creep, then usually you don't get the +2 attack damage for that particular creep. But at the same time, if your ally, just at the same time that your globe arrives, launches another area of effect spell, and those creeps die maybe just like half a second or a second after your globe hits, that still counts. So that's an incredible powerful thing that you have to know there. And if you really work well with that, you can do a lot of damage at the beginning. You can really start to farm the first 3 or 4 waves, and suddenly you have +20, +30, +40 damage, and with that you can already do a whole lot. And once again, when we have Black Pool, it's just so easy for us to use a Black Pool and a Globe of Annihilation and take down an entire wave in just one shot. And of course, if you just move from lane to lane the entire time and you farm those waves, you will get so much extra damage on your Globe of Annihilation that later, in the end stages of the game, you can do more than 1,000, nearly 2,000 damage with a single globe towards hero targets. And that's of course incredible, and your opponent will have a huge problem. And it's of course not only about the late game damage, that's just a perk. It's also about how fast you are able to push these lanes. Just imagine yourself going on a lane, taking down the entire enemy creep wave with a single globe, moving in, pushing with your own wave, and then using your summoning abilities to just like let those demon warriors barrel down that lane, do damage to the fort, to the keep, and push them in. Your opponent is always forced to just move back, defend, and trying to react to what you do. And that's also when your escape abilities need to come into play, because they are going to try to hunt you down. And on a lot of those maps, when the entire team, like both teams, try to go for the objectives, you're actually a really good character to, at least at the beginning of the game, not go into these fights, but try to push the lane. And the longer that your team can delay them, the better for you, because that frees up extra time for you to take down their structures. So guys, when you play the Lord of the Dunks, make sure that you play with a friend. It really pays off. It makes it so much easier to farm the extra damage for your Globe of Annihilation. I hope that you give him a try. The character is absolutely amazing. He's a lot of fun to play, and especially when you are able to queue with a partner, you will have a lot of fun in those quick matches and in Hero League. So I hope that you learned something today. If you did, make sure that you give the video a thumbs up on YouTube. If you have any questions, just post them in the comment section. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, hit that subscribe button. And yeah, I guess I see you guys for the next tutorial here on KhaldorTV for Heroes of the Storm.